A bit of a preface here. I was around 10 to 11 years old when this happened. Old enough to stay home alone, but not old enough to recognize some red flags. I attended camp over the summer, the typical 8 to 3 routine. My house sits close to the end of my street, which forms a U, but for some reason the bus driver would never just drop me off at my house. I would always get dropped off at the end of my street, where I would toddle myself along back home. Both my parents worked late hours, sometimes not getting home until 8 p.m., and it would be very expensive to hire a babysitter for 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So, starting in 6th grade, when the bus dropped me off at home, I would be all by myself. I'd do the usual middle school routine, play games online and watch TV. Occasionally, my neighbor's cat would come into my backyard, and I would feed and pet her as a way to get outside. The only computer in the house was in my dad's workroom, which has a window overlooking the deck and a window overlooking the side of the house. We have large bay windows in the living room, dining room, and kitchen of my house, and since we sit on a hill, you can pretty much see the entire backyard from a nice vantage point. Most days when I got home, I'd toss off my backpack and go right to that room. You could see me walk from my front door and pop up by the computer from outside. Unfortunately, this would lead to something that I had forgotten about until now. When I got off the bus that day, I did as expected. I went into my dad's workroom and played some computer games. About 30 minutes into this, I could hear a faint meowing coming from the outside window. I paused the game to take a look outside, thinking maybe my neighbor's cat had wandered over once again. But there was nothing. I just sat back down and resumed playing, only to hear the meowing once again. It was quiet, but still noticeable, and so I checked the other window. Nothing again. This routine happened for a good 10 minutes. Eventually I got frustrated and went into the living room to watch TV. Not even 2 minutes later, meowing started coming from the window I was sitting right beside. Now I was confused and more than a little creeped out, so I shut the blinds tight and kept trying to watch TV. The meows continued, but only when they came from the window right behind me did I jump and leave the living room, officially skeeved. I went into my bathroom where the blinds were down, but still cracked a little for some sunlight. I tried to read a book, only to hear a meow come from outside my bedroom window. This was enough for me to call my dad, concerned that maybe the cat was hurt, but I couldn't see it to be sure. He said he would have the neighbor come check it out right away, and call me back later. 10 minutes go by, and I get a call from my dad saying that he was coming home from work. Nothing urgent in his voice, just that his job had gotten canceled for the day and he would come home early. I thought nothing of it. When he got home, I realized that the cat noises had stopped. Fast forward to the present, and I asked my dad about that strange incident, thinking it was funny because the cat had followed me around. What he told me next made my blood run cold. After I'd called him, my neighbor did indeed come to check on the house. What he found were large footprints, leading in circles all around the house, clustered close to the walls so that even if I looked outside, I wouldn't be able to see anything. Someone had been stalking me through my house, seeing where I was through the large windows, and making cat noises to try and get me to come outside. They must have known I was home alone, since it was easy to see me walk by myself down the street and let myself in. My neighbor immediately called my dad and searched the whole property, but he found no one. The police weren't called since there was nothing but footprints that led off into the woods and got lost, and I never saw anyone. My dad stayed home with me for the rest of the week, It sickens me to know that there are people who would use these tactics to try and lure kids from their homes, and from there do whatever they wanted with them. When I was 13, the dawning of a new millennium took place on New Year's Eve. While people were fearing the worst with the Y2K bug or out partying and drinking, I was home all alone. In 1996, my parents had split up, and from there they were divorced. My mother and I moved across the country from Oregon to Tennessee with her best friend. On the eve of the year 2000, I was home alone, and my mother was currently out of state. This didn't worry me, as this wasn't the first time. I often came home to find a note on the kitchen counter saying that they had gone to Florida for a few days and that there were groceries in the fridge. Since the divorce, she was regularly leaving me alone for long periods of time to go out to Florida. We lived on a relatively quiet road, surrounded by trees and set a few miles out of town. I knew most of the people, if not by name, then by face, enough to wave and have a small chat with. I had never before been given a reason to be afraid of being alone. On the night in question, I was staying up late watching television. I remember I was watching the movie His Bodyguard on USA Channel, and had most of the lights on in the house, not because I was afraid, but because at 13, I wasn't concerned with electricity bills or saving the environment. I felt completely safe and protected within my little bubble of home. As I was watching the movie, I kept hearing these weird noises outside. I remembered thinking that it was probably the neighbors. Although they weren't extremely close, a couple of them were having a party and people over for the holiday. About halfway into the movie, however, the power in the house suddenly went dead. I sat on the couch for a minute, sort of in a panicked daze, because it was near midnight and now pitch black. I remembered thinking that the power must have gone out, and that surely it would come back on. I decided to sit on the couch with my blanket and wait. A few minutes passed by, when I heard a noise in the kitchen where the back door is. My heart started racing in my chest, because I thought it sounded like the back door being shut. The back door sits just off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen, which leads directly into the living room where I was currently sitting on the couch. A few seconds passed after I heard the sound, and I was straining my ears to pick up anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Suddenly, every noise felt magnified. When footsteps sounded on the floor, I immediately slithered off the couch onto all fours, crawled around the ottoman, and started as slowly and as quietly as I could to make my way towards the space between the love seat and the couch. I knew I could fit under the side table and be completely hidden by the dark in the ottoman, from playing hide-and-go-seek in the dark many times with my friends during sleepovers. I was nearly there when the footsteps became all the more apparent. I knew from the sound of them that whoever it was making their way through the kitchen now toward the living room. They weren't in a hurry or anything. It was like they were just moving around in their own home. I glanced up from where I was crouched on the floor. To my horror, there was a dark silhouette standing in the archway between the two rooms. To my credit, I didn't scream. However, I did panic. I stood up immediately to my feet from my hiding spot and ran down the hallway. I believe the only reason I wasn't overcome was because the person chasing me had to get around the ottoman in the dark to follow me. I did what all children do when they're afraid. I ran past the front door, the guest bedroom, the bathroom, and ran to the farthest door down the hallway, my room. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have even been able to get the front door unlocked and open in time, as it was right off to the side of the couch. When I was 10, I had gotten a bird for my birthday. He was a blue-fronted Amazon, and I named him Boo, because it was October and close to Halloween. Boo had a large iron cage. It could have been metal, but very large, sturdy, and about 6 feet tall, and it was kept in my room, despite the fact that Boo, like me, pretty much had the run of the house whenever he wanted. This information will become relevant later in the story. As I ran into the room, I slammed the door shut and locked it. However, the lock was simply one of those little turn knobs that you can easily pop with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when the person on the other side knocked on it. I have no idea why they knocked, if they did it to just mock me or to scare me, but I knew in my heart that that little lock was not going to keep whoever it was on the other side out of my room. It couldn't even keep my mother out when we were arguing, and it wouldn't stand up to any brute force. I was panicking, on the verge of tears, when the person started laughing. It was low and quiet, and because of that, it was even more frightening. It wasn't a manic laughter, but as if someone were genuinely amused. It was the laughter that really frightened me, and I started heavily and hysterically crying. I looked around the room to figure out what I could do. That was when I realized Boo's cage would fit almost perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. The cage moved quietly on my carpeted floor, but as I pushed it into place, it scraped against the door and alerted whoever it was on the other side that I was trying to barricade myself in. Suddenly, they threw themselves at my door, and you could hear the sound of the wood splintering and the door handle being twisted violently. Boo, who had been stirred awake by the movement, began literally screaming and flapping his wings. I might have screamed with him, but honestly I don't remember. I just remember being extremely scared. Terrified, I crawled under my bed/couch, a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom, and waited. Several minutes passed by, and the person eventually stopped attacking my door. Boo continued to scream even after he had stopped. Though being under my bed gave me no feelings of being secure, I didn't come out from under it because I simply had nowhere else to go. I thought about trying to sneak out through the window, but I was afraid he might expect it and be there waiting for me on the other side. It was also several feet off the ground, as the house was built on a raised foundation. I remember laying under my bed, terrified for what felt like hours. I must have fallen asleep, because when I awoke the next morning, it was already daylight. The fear of what had happened came back to me as soon as I registered where I was and why, and scared that whoever had been in my house might still be there. I decided to crawl out the window and run to a neighbor's house, since it was daylight outside and therefore I felt less afraid. Crawling out a window is a lot harder than it looks, and I did it less than gracefully. I was, and still am not, the most coordinated human being. Once I was back on my feet, however, I carefully made my way around the house, and that's when I noticed that the back door was wide open. Scared, but feeling a little braver now that I was outside, and that it was morning instead of pitch black night, I walked up the back steps and peered inside. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, I decided to go in. Looking back, I cringe on how stupid this could have turned out, and that I wish I could have told my younger self to make the smarter move and go get help, but thankfully the man was no longer inside the house. I did a terrifying, heart-pounding room-to-room check, looking in all the closets and under all the beds, behind the couch, anywhere I thought even the smallest child might be able to fit. I even popped the lock on my mom's bedroom so I could check it, and then relocked it afterwards. When I was positive there was no one there, I went back to lock the back door, and noticed that the breaker box on the opposite wall was open. The main switch had been pulled. I flipped it back on, locked both locks on the back door, checked all the windows and front door, and then called my mom. Once again, I broke down crying hysterically. She called a coworker, who came and stayed the entire day with me as they drove back. My mom still took random trips to Florida after that, but she always took me with her from then onward. So, terrifying, crazy person that broke into my house on New Year's Eve, please let's never meet again. I sincerely hope no other young girl had to meet you either. I don't know if you were just some drunk visitor of a neighbor, but you terrorized me that night. I was afraid of being alone when my mom was working, and to this day I still get scared when I'm all alone. I overthink what I would do if someone came inside, and how I could hide. When my cats make noise out of nowhere, I immediately investigate for fear that it's someone trying to get in once again. So this was something that happened in my freshman year of college. Being new to a campus that I didn't have many friends on, I began seeking out some cool people to hang out with, as I had long breaks between my classes. I quickly found myself spending time with a large group of girls from my math class. We began spending time in the lounge area of my campus, and made some friends through there too. To give an idea, it was a relatively smaller campus with only a few buildings, and the lounge area was quite a small room with some pool tables and seats. As the semester went on, we began making it a regular ordeal to all go to lunch or coffee at least once a week. Our lunch group quickly went from 5 people to nearly 20. Friends started bringing acquaintances, and so our group grew once again. One kid named Spencer, who was a friend's friend, joined us regularly for coffee or lunch. One day, word got back to me that he was into me and wanted to get my number. I nicely told my friend that I wasn't interested, and that I had a boyfriend already, which was a lie. I thought this would deter him, as he came off as a non-confrontational person. One morning, a group message was sent out by my friend Trish, who asked if we all wanted to meet up for coffee, and everyone, for the most part, agreed to meet. I arrived about 10 minutes early to almost everything, so I was used to being the first one there. Spencer arrived shortly after me. He sat down next to me, and I exchanged a friendly "good morning" and a smile. Slowly, the time passed, and no one else showed up. We sat there awkwardly for about 15 minutes, when finally he spoke up and said, "This is a surprise date. I planned it." I think it's important to mention I'm pretty hot-headed, and I definitely don't like being lied to. I got up from the chair, gathered my things, and left without a word. The next couple of weeks went by without a word from Spencer. I thought maybe that he had gotten the hint that I wasn't interested. Soon, though, he began to show up at the same time that I worked out at the school gym. I didn't think much of it at first because our schedules were pretty similar, so, like myself, I assumed that this was just the only time he had to work out. Soon it went from being there at the same time to him following me around the gym. Whatever machine I was using, he would conveniently be at the one right next to me, lifting some light weights and staring. I had some friends that worked at the front desk of the gym, so I mentioned it to them and they said they'd take care of it if it got too out of hand. One day while I was squatting at the gym, mid-rep, he walked up and pulled my headphones out and proceeded to tell me that my form was off while grabbing my waist. I racked my bar and turned around angrily, yelling at him, "Don't you dare fucking touch me." He apologized and proceeded to ask me out once again. I told him I wasn't interested and had a boyfriend anyways. Once again, a couple of weeks went by, and the only contact I had with Spencer was sitting at the opposite end of the table during our lunch gatherings. I thought he had finally gotten the hint. Then one day at the gym, as I was walking down the hallway to the girls' locker room, he walked up behind me and put both hands on either side of the wall behind my head. He said, "I know you feel the connection I do, so why don't you let me take you out?" I quickly yelled for my friend Chris, who worked at the gym's front desk. Keep in mind he's very large, about 6'3", and extremely fit, whereas Spencer is 5'7" and, well, not. Chris quickly walked around the corner to see what was happening, and came running down the hall yelling at Spencer. He was then banned from the gym and not allowed back in. One night, I get a text message from a random number, stating that it's Spencer and that he wanted to apologize for what happened at the gym. I told him that what he had done wasn't okay, and that I wasn't interested in him and that I'd like for him to leave me alone from now on. He apologized again and again. I didn't hear anything else. Thinking that was the last time, I blocked his number. All was well, until one day I came home from work to a bouquet of white lilies sitting on my doorstep. Thinking they were from my grandma, who likes to do stuff like this, I got excited and picked them up and took them inside. Then I read the letter attached. It was unsigned and just said, "I love watching you." I frantically started calling and texting friends, thinking this was some sick joke as they all knew about how creepy Spencer had been. I got concerned answers and honest no's from every single person. I panicked and threw the flowers out and made sure to lock my door. Later that night, I got a text from a random number. "You didn't enjoy your flowers? I saw you throw them away." At this point, I had had enough. I called the number, and the familiar voice of Spencer was on the other line. I lost my shit, quite literally. I didn't even let him get past his sickening hello before I started screaming at him. He then calmly stated that if I wanted to talk to him, that all I had to do was come outside. I looked out my window, and there he was, standing in front of my house and smiling. I called the cops, and when they showed up, they detained him and got a restraining order placed on him. The cops then contacted me a couple of days later to let me know he had more than one order placed for the same behavior, 10, including mine to be exact. I had late classes that semester after this, and I called campus police to walk me to my car every night because I was terrified he would show up again. Shortly after that, I moved about 300 miles away, and luckily I've never seen him again, other than his every so often random Instagram follow requests. First time posting on Reddit. I had a strange, unsolved experience as a kid that's been on my mind quite a lot lately, and I decided this is the right place to share. The first half of this story takes place on Halloween of 1991. A quick bit of background: I was a 7-year-old boy at the time, and my sister was only a few months old. I lived in Long Island, New York, on the border area of the town that kind of acted as an unspoken separation between the more affluent area and the lower-income hood-type areas. My dad owned a bar across from the train station that was extremely popular in the 80s and was still riding the tail end of that boom. My father did very well for himself. My father and his business were well known around town. I think this may have something to do with what had happened. He eventually squandered everything on a heroin addiction, but that's a different story. And for the record, I had nothing but love and respect for him, despite all of his flaws. So, it was Halloween. My mom was working the night shift at my dad's bar. My sister was home with a teenage babysitter. My dad had taken me and my friend trick-or-treating. This was the first year I was able to go out at night, so I was super stoked. When we got home, though, there were cops at my house. The babysitter was crying, and my mom had already come home. Earlier, while the sitter was alone with my sister, she got a phone call from an unknown woman, asking specifically for me. She had told the person I wasn't there, and the woman stated that she had a gift for me, and that she would call back. This woman had called back a few times, saying something similar, and she began to insist that she was going to come and deliver her gift personally. Eventually, she called and said to look in the mailbox. That was when the sitter called the police. The police found a pirate skull Halloween decoration that would talk and shake when you clapped, as well as several candy bars. My whole family was really bugged out about this. I was scared, but I also kind of liked the skull thing, and convinced my parents after much protest to let me keep it. My parents, for a few weeks after that, were on edge, and hated the toy. They tried to work with the police, but there wasn't much they could do, and the whole thing kinda just went cold. Fast forward to the following summer, 1992. My best friend and I decided to have a car wash in front of his house, which was diagonally across the street from mine. We had out buckets, soap, a hose, and a sign. You get the picture. Suddenly, this black car rolls up. It was an old 80s Crown Vic or something that looked like it. One of those big cars that steers like a boat. The car rolls down the window, and there's a woman sitting in the driver's seat. She had short white hair, kinda had this whole Ursula vibe going on. I told my parents at the time that she was old because of the hair, but looking back, she probably had been as young as her 40s. She says to me, "Hi, my name. Do you know who I am?" I told her no. Suddenly, she says, "I'm the one who gave you those nice presents on Halloween." My jaw dropped and I froze, just staring. Then, like something straight out of a movie, she began to laugh maniacally, and after a moment sped off. I ran home and told my parents. That was the end of it, and they never figured out who it was. My father had speculated that this person may have believed he was wealthy, and maybe was trying to get a ransom or something. Maybe she was a scorned ex-lover. I don't know, I've speculated many things, but we'll likely never know at this point. I'm now 35, and that was all a lifetime ago. Sorry if this was an underwhelming payoff at the end, but it's bugged me for years, and I wanted to share it. In the past year, I've had several of my dad's old friends find and reach out to me on Facebook. My dad and I have a very similar face, and the same name, so I was easy to find. Two of them are women. One of them made me a little uncomfortable because she kept pushing to hang out, and she's a lot older than me. Not like a casual hangout, like a go-to-the-bar hangout. I said no, of course, but she started to ask a lot of personal questions. And that's what brought the story back to the forefront of my mind. I'm getting a weird feeling in my gut that this woman is the same woman that stalked me as a child. That thought gives me a chill, but I would really like to know for sure who this person was, and why they had even stalked me. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. As always, be sure to let me know what you guys think, and please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. I know some people have also had some problems about videos not appearing in their sub box, so please make sure to hit that little bell if you guys want to always be notified of when my next video comes out. As always, links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below. You can find links to my Twitter, Gmail, Twitch, and Facebook accounts. So if you guys ever want to talk to me, just go ahead and shoot me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond to your message as soon as possible. I'm also going to start trying to stream on Twitch a little bit more, so if you guys have notifications on there, you'll be notified right away when I go live. I might also try to do some on YouTube, but I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of trying to decide what kind of streams I want to do. Anyways, if you guys have a story you would like to send in, or if you have a story you would like to suggest that I read, go ahead and send me a message on any of those links in the description below. If you do decide to send in a story, Please be sure to include the title, how you would like to be credited, and any genres that the story might have, if it does have one. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, go ahead and take a look in the description below as well. I always put all of the music in the order in which it appears in the video, and I also have links to the artists as well. Last but not least, I also have a Patreon if you guys feel like you want to contribute to the channel a little bit, but of course, as always, it is never required and you will never have to pay for watching any of my videos, so that's just something you do if you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.